Going here.
All right, let me hit the OK button here. All right, there we go.
All righty. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. We have another awesome conversation that we are going to be having. We have our guest speaker here, Amir Khan, and we want to thank him very much for appearing and educating us with regards to real estate and all of the ins and outs. And believe me, folks, there are more than you realize. And we're not only going to have a discussion, but we're going to point you to some resources that are going to be helpful for you at the end of the call here. I'll be sharing my screen and you'll be able to see what we're talking about. Amir, thank you so much for joining today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I'm sure you're a busy guy, and so we won't keep you a long time, but we definitely appreciate you coming on and offering your expertise in this area. Welcome.
All right, well, thank you, Keith. I'm happy to be here, happy to help, and look forward to our discussion. And again, helping people just understand a little bit more than they might have known previously. So
Yes.
that's the goal: help people understand and get information that they can actually use.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, knowledge is
Mhm.
power.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't we start our conversation out by introducing your journey into the real estate world. Talk a little bit about
Okay.
that journey and how you got
All right.
started.
So I'm going to say my interest actually started when I was 17 years old. And at that point,
Going
we
back
were
in
living
time
in
here.
way back, and we won't stay there long. Um, we were living in Ohio, and I just, like the home showcase type things. I
Yeah.
saw some of those and went to one. I'm thinking, oh, this looks like a good opportunity. This looks like something to do because, again, when you experience different things, it opens up your mind to possibilities you might not have had previously.
Yes.
So that was where that initial kind of push for real estate came.
Mm,
So then I went into consulting. I did consulting for about 30 years, after college. And but there was always still this in the back of your mind, I think real estate might be interesting. It might be something at that time fun to do.
yes.
So while I was at this time living in Georgia, I did sell real estate for a couple of years, but I did it part-time because, and of course, the full-time job, the family, everything gets busy, busy, busy. So I didn't do as much as I wanted to, and then ended up here in Florida, for a series of different events that were actually good, and it was still in the back of my mind. So
Mm,
after the consulting, or about 10 years ago, and our company had a layoff. So again, looking at what position I was in at that point, a friend of mine said, "Why don't you do something you really want to do since you've got the opportunity?" So I went ahead, got my real estate license, sold for a couple years. I did go back into consulting for about another 8 or 9 years,
hmm.
and it was part time. So again, it's hard to do the full time IT consulting and part time real estate because there's so many demands for both the jobs.
Yes.
But then once towards at the end of that career, based on another event, I said, well, I could actually do this full time now and actually devote my time to it, devote all my attention to it. Still was toying with the idea of going back into consulting, but real estate's like consulting. You're helping people identify what they need, why they need it, what kind of budget do they have, what's going to tell them that they've satisfied what they're looking for, what they intend to see. And that's pretty much what, at least my position is in consulting, working with customers to help them define that. What is it
Yes.
that tells us that we've achieved what we wanted?
Excellent.
So it was from the people side, it was a good transition. But again, now it's just making sure we understand all the different rules about real estate
Sure.
and applying those for our customers. Mhm.
Sure, sure. This is probably a good
Mhm.
segue then, Amir,
Mhm.
into
Mhm.
describing unique transactions. What do you mean
Okay.
by unique
Right.
transactions?
Yeah. So my philosophy around this is, people are familiar with, let's say most people are familiar with buying and selling a house, meaning they either want to sell their house or they want to buy one. So, especially when we think about buying, we find a property and then we close on that property. That's pretty much all that is exactly the same for any buyer. It's similar for seller. They decide they want to sell the house. There's a process in the middle of all that of how the house gets sold and then it closes. So everything else in between, following the rules and regulations. It's a unique transaction because each property is unique, So there can be different things for every single property. The conditions for each buyer or seller are different, and the reasons why those things need to happen, those are all different. So you really don't have one transaction that's exactly the same. You probably have a lot that are similar, but no one transaction or no two transactions are exactly the same. And
Hmm.
that's another part that I like it because it's unique and you get to figure out and help the buyers and sellers figure out, well, how do we handle these different situations that can come up?
Yes,
Right?
yes. And I think at one time when we were talking, you were saying that there are so many different types of mortgage programs that are
Yeah,
available. And I
there
know
are.
we're going to
Hmm.
talk about that in a few minutes, but
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
think that applies to the unique thing, right? Because a person may qualify for something that another person may not qualify,
That's
depending
very
on their
true. Mhm.
unique
Mhm.
situation, right? Would that be
Right. Hmm.
a fair statement?
That's completely true.
Yeah, interesting.
Mhm.
So, so then, with regards to interest rates and
Hmm.
financing and all of that kind of stuff, we might as well move right into that. Talk a
Okay.
little bit about the different types of mortgages, and then maybe who would qualify for what, and go into a little bit of that so people can get an idea.
All right. So I'll go, I have to be more general because one of the things you have to be careful of since I'm not a mortgage finance person and I'm
Right.
not certified and educated completely in that. We'll talk in general about the different types of programs and
Sure.
kind of what the interest rates look like right now. So right now, when I check today through homes.com, um, for the and we're going to focus on just single family residential homes. So that way we
Okay.
keep it, a little bit more aligned at least.
Sure.
Um, it's 6.4% for a 30-year mortgage and 5.98 for a 15-year mortgage. That's slightly up from last week. And these were the latest, again, as of today. There's an email I received today that indicated those. We were talking about finance for specific properties. And people may be familiar with conventional mortgages, adjustable rate mortgages, FHA mortgages, or as one of the types of government mortgages. You could have seller financing, or the seller will provide a mortgage back to somebody that's buying. You could, of course, pay cash, depending on what you're looking for and your means at that point. So there's multiple things that are available. One of the things to keep in mind that when you're working with a realtor and they have access to the MLS for a specific property, there may be multiple different programs available that are listed in the MLS. And so again, your buyer may qualify for some of those. And the idea is that knowing that those are available without having to do a lot of extra research, you
Hmm.
can let the lenders also know that these are for this property. Here's some programs that came up. Do you offer any of those? And again, that's information you share with your buyer. You share it with the people they decide to use as their lenders.
Yeah.
And in that way, people have access to a lot more things that they just may not have known about.
Can you give us an
Um,
example, Amir, like what that would look like? Like if somebody walked in and saw a piece of
mhm.
property and I don't know, if it's a fixer upper or something, you mean, is there specific programs for that?
Yeah, there are. So I'm going to say, let's do it this way. Just say there's a single family home that doesn't need a lot of work. So we're thinking that we'll go conventional financing. Well, because of where that home is located, when we go and look in the MLS, there's a list that tells you, well, here are the programs available. There could be a community grant product available. There could
Hmm.
be a down payment assistance program that's available. That becomes based on the price of the home, where it is, the buyer's, not the buyer's credit, but the buyer's income, the cost of the house, so things like that. And there's not just one down payment assistance program. There's multiples.
Hmm.
There's some that could be offered just by a specific lender. There's some that are offered by, I'll say it this way, different government organizations, so state, federal, local.
Okay.
So, but without, at least for me, when I look in the MLS, then I'm aware of all those things. And then there's also the option that the seller could finance it for the buyer. And so
Right.
that's just one of the discussions, which it gets back to here's how these transactions are unique. We found a property, now we need to figure out what is all that we need to do to make sure the buyer can close on it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're talking about the property more so than the person. I mean, of course, the person needs to be able to
Yeah.
qualify for the mortgage, right? And
Right. Hmm.
that's a bank thing. They look at, the person's income, I'm sure, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think from what I remember, because I used to dabble in real estate quite a while ago, and I think, right, conventional, there's a certain percentage of the income they only use a certain percentage of your income for what is it, PITI or something, principal
Yeah,
interest
it's
taxes.
your principal interest, taxes, and insurance.
Yeah.
Again, the mortgage companies typically will look at all those together.
Okay.
There's certain depending on the type of mortgage, they'll be looking at what your debt to income ratios are.
Okay.
And again, they can vary. A
Yeah.
specific lender may have different conditions. They could be more lenient or more restrictive, but I do
Hmm.
believe they have some governmental regulations they have to follow.
Okay.
Against the property itself, the appraisal that comes back, what type of insurance can be available for that property, does it require repairs? And there's certain
Yes.
loans that you can build your repairs into the loan.
Yes.
Depends on where the property is located. And again, your own personal credit impacts those when you're trying to get and secure a
Sure.
specific type of mortgage.
Yep.
Um,
I'm remembering, and I think it's good for our audience to be aware that when you step in and talk to a broker, and we're going to mention a couple people's names that you can
mhm,
go to and talk to if you're interested in talking to them. But there is two percentages, right? And what you said was very good, right?
mhm,
It's the PITI part of it, principal, interest, taxes, and
mhm.
insurance. That's the lower percentage. And then there's a little bit higher percentage that includes that debt, right? But
Yeah, and again, each
I think there's
lender
only
will,
some debt that's included, right, Amir?
yeah, and again, that's what the lender will go through with each
Yeah.
person in detail,
Yeah.
because again, it depends on those other factors we talked about, and again,
Yeah.
your own credit is part of it,
Yes.
and the type of loan that the mortgage broker thinks would work for you.
Sure.
There's again different requirements.
Yep.
Um, like for example, I know there was a loan that I went through, and at the beginning of the loan, there was one percentage that was needed in terms of the down payment. When we got through all the other details, so further down the road, there was an investor that was funding the loan. Well, the terms changed slightly. So that meant I had to change not how I was funding it, but the amount I would had to contribute to fund it. And again, it was one product, the product fit the property, but the investor that was funding the loan had a new requirement later on in the process.
Okay. Yeah.
So which was it was fine for the situation I had.
Right.
As those are just some things to be aware of. And again, questions that the potential buyers can ask their lenders, things like
Sure.
that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Excellent. No, that's excellent. That's really good. I hope everybody's listening closely because this is good, right? If you're thinking about buying a home or especially from the mortgage perspective, right? Because, obviously you got to know. I got another question for you, Amir. So,
Okay, yeah.
with regards to the property itself, right? Now, I've heard of an old saying, real estate is all about location, 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 right? I've heard that many times,
Yeah.
right? But the thing is, what if what would you recommend to somebody that if they found a home that they really liked, but
hmm
it wasn't in the most affluent, or I don't know what the right word is to be honest with you, but an area where the property values are not as high, right?
hmm
I'm in where I live here in Florida. There's a little town called Holiday, right? And I know the
Okay.
property values in Holiday are a lot lower than they are in Trinity
hmm
or Odessa. But what's really weird, Amir, it's not that far away. Holiday's like
Right.
right around the
hmm
corner. I mean, so it's like, so why does that happen? And what would you say to somebody that if they're going to buy in an area like that, what to be aware of, I guess.
Well, that's where we go through, and you and I were talking about the consultation. So, what I
Yeah.
recommend is that buyers have that consultation with their realtor
Hmm.
about what the buyer is really looking for, kind of some of the whys that they are looking for, because we have an obligation just to show you properties that fit the criteria that you specify. Again, not violating any laws, but it's typically around, how large a home do you need?
Right.
Um, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, does it need a pool, things like that, so that
Yes.
we find the properties that fit it. And then as realtors, we have the obligation to show you properties that fit that area. Now, let's say if we use Pasco County as the example. So if you already know you're not intending to live in Holiday and you pretty much intend, let's say, to live in Wesley Chapel, it's okay for you to let us know that, but we still make sure you properties in other areas because there's properties that fit your criteria.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you get a picture of what is available based on the criteria that you have.
Right. Okay.
And somebody might say, well, I'd like to live close to the expressway. Well, then that means certain properties in Wesley Chapel might be closer to expressway than something that's in Holiday.
Right. Understood.
But that's not violating any
Yeah.
law. So it's just things like
Right.
that
Right.
that you can use when you're talking with your customers to help identify potential properties that are going to fit their needs.
Sure. Is it safe to
Yeah.
say though, Amir, that without violating any laws, I think like steering or some other kind of laws there that I'm remembering in my brain here.
Mhm.
But without doing anything illegal, would it be fair to say that it's important to understand that if you buy in this area, that the property values are not going to increase, may potentially. There's more of a risk. Would you say that is that a fair statement to make or not?
That's not something I could say.
Yeah,
What we can do is just using the historical data and
show
say
property
that
values.
the
Okay.
values are trending this way.
Yeah.
But again, we're not in control of what happens the next day.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and typically I go with more of the market itself. And again, you can narrow it
Mhm.
down to a zip code, and you could say, well, this zip code, over the last year, here's how prices have trended over the last year. And
Yes.
again, it still gets back to the type of property. So let's say within the same zip code,
Yes.
a three-bedroom property, let's say maybe those prices tend to be going down, but a five-bedroom, they tend to be going up. So it's
Yes.
you have to decide or determine what's the right level of detail that somebody's going to need.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, because that's just only one factor in helping that somebody is looking at when they decide where they'd actually like to purchase a property.
Sure. Sure. Is there anything else with regard to market trends that we should pay attention to?
Yeah, well, just in general, right now in Florida, so the overall state, prices are up about 6% overall, with the median being around 418,000 against for single family homes. New listings are actually down, so there's lower inventory, which again drives higher prices. So again, a supply and demand type issue. But I did find out from the information I received today that that's part of just the typical cycle for first quarter of every year. So it's a typical cycle that the number of listings are down. So we're going into the second quarter. So again, we might see prices going up. There were some interesting statistics that were shared, and this is again as of at the end of March. And of course, you can always look for more current data, but I was just going through Florida Realtors to get kind of their official information. And the price ranges again for the state, 200 to 300,000. Those are sales are up 14.2%. So I mean sales meaning they closed. 300 to 400, they were about the same as last year for the same time period. 400 to
Hmm.
500, they're up 2.8%, and 500 to 600, they're up about 3.8%. So the state overall is healthy with the in terms of the sales that are closing. So that again gives people a general idea for the state itself. If we want something that's a little bit more specific for Pinellas, Pasco, and Hillsborough, so give me a moment to switch over to those.
All righty.
We need to go here. And again, these were one reports I pulled today.
Okay.
All right, so for Hillsborough right now, the median sale price is 415, and again, that's similar to what we had for the state overall. Um, the closed sales are actually down about 2% from last year. And right now, listings are actually down about 14%. So it's still kind of driving the same thing that we were seeing at the state level.
Hmm.
In Pinellas, it's a little bit different, similar but different. Let's open this one for Pinellas. The median price a little bit higher in Pinellas, about 456K. Uh, the volume itself for sales at close, it's down about 2.5%. So it's 974 right now.
Hmm.
And let's see, listings, which I thought was interesting, were down like 24% from last year for the same time period. So we've got
Wow.
about 11, almost 1,200 listings total right now, as of the end of March, because that's when the data is available. The next report comes out on May 15th, and
Hmm.
that'll be available at Florida Realtors again, for at least for all the realtors.
Now,
And
what
then
do
there's
you
tax.
attribute Pinellas County being a higher value? What it is? Is it closer to the ocean or what is it?
I think because the county's so densely populated
Hmm.
and there's not much buildable land. And
Oh,
so,
okay.
and again, you have the beach impact. We didn't go into, well, this is just, again, all single family homes. So
Yeah.
that will impact it. But what I've been seeing is that it's mainly because there's not a lot of buildable land left in Pinellas County. And
Hmm.
it's the most densely populated in the area.
Yes.
And if I remember right, I'd have to check again to make sure. I think it's the most densely populated county in the state.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
So
you're
there's,
talking about data here and
mhm,
research and all those things. You know, I thought we could segue for a minute into the services that you as a realtor, what is it
okay.
exactly are the services that you would offer a buyer or a seller or
Okay.
both?
Yeah, so when we talk about buyers and sellers, again, I was mentioning to you that I know there's an infographic. I can't find it that says there's 179 things your realtor will do for you, or that can do for you. Not that they will do, but that they can do. And there's probably 192 more that we just don't know about yet. Again, because of those different unique situations. But
Mm,
it's one is to understand what the buyers and sellers really want and need, and make those things come together so that both parties understand, um, helping with price research, so that and helping your buyers and sellers understand the market so that how their particular property fits into what that overall market looks like. And
right.
then we do narrow it down to, again, we can get to a zip code. And if there are enough sales, we can get it down to your street.
Gotcha.
So that's just something to be aware. And that's at that point in time, that's your best data. We
Gotcha.
help you understand the different other companies you need to be in contact with. So, like your mortgage company, like the insurance companies, like the county tax appraiser's office, things, people like that, or groups like that, your inspectors, so that you know and understand. Here's all these people that are going to impact, your transaction. You might need certain vendors to do certain work for you, either as a buyer or a seller. So we,
Hmm.
help you find those folks. Um, you might want data about schools. So there's a limit to what I say, based on the laws, there's a limit to what we can tell you to stay out of stay out of legal trouble. I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
But we can help you understand where you can go find that more detailed information that you might need.
For
Um,
pertaining to schools for the kids, you mean?
yeah, schools,
Yeah.
and let's leave it at that level. We won't talk about the universities and things. That's a different way to look at those. But let's
Yeah.
say your schools, so your kindergarten through high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's important to people, and again, that's something people want to know about. So because if they're going
Right.
to live there, they want to know where their kids are going to school.
Yeah.
Um, so we can help you figure out, okay, what types of repairs should we do? We can offer advice on that. And again, it can come down to what neighborhood are you in, help you understand what makes more sense to fix or repair or replace versus not to. And
Hmm.
again, part of that depends on what is the target price we're after. How fast do we want to try to sell this property? Things like that.
Yeah.
And it won't be the same. Again, even on the same street, it'll vary from house to house about what's really needed.
Yeah.
And so we want to help people understand that. We'll run some errands for you. Not errands like, okay, you get my groceries. Well, some people might, but things like, okay, I need to drop something off at my insurance company. Well, that's something we can help you with. I'll say that I don't mind helping with. And we'll make sure we get the right thing signed so that can be done.
Yeah.
Um, Following up on a question that you might have. Again, acting as your, not acting as you, but trying to find information for you and get that back to you so you can make a decision.
What about
And
them, like after they, like, let's say they are under contract and
mhm,
now all the things that pertain to the house, meaning like, and we're going to talk about HOAs, but how to get
yeah,
in touch with HOAs,
Yep.
how to get in touch with utility companies,
Hmm.
cable, anything that pertains to the house. Do you provide that
Yes.
information?
Yeah, we can help you find that information. We can give you those addresses and phone numbers, websites,
Hmm.
and then you as the buyer or seller, contact those agencies individually.
Hmm.
Um, let's see, you asked about the HOA, so that's part of the contract itself, that if the home is in an HOA, there are requirements to get that information that the seller has to, sorry, not the seller, the buyer has to be able to see that information. And there are
Hmm.
certain time frames around that. So we help obtain that because sometimes
Okay.
it's not straightforward.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I do want to make a quick distinction. Well, I'll wait till we get and talk about the HOAs. I'll wait till we talk about that later,
Yeah.
so that we don't overdo it at this point. Um,
Well, it sounds like you
all
got a lot of
utility.
services that you're willing to offer and going
Yeah.
above and beyond.
Yeah. One
Just
of
to
the
make sure
things
that, but
too.
what else is unique have you found that people really ask about? Like if there's a pool, do you give a pool guy, the guy that did the pool, or, I mean, do you get
If
that nitty
yeah,
gritty, or what do you do?
if that's available, let's say the property has had a pool installed after it was originally built.
Yeah.
If that's available, especially if it's available in the public records, or if the current seller has that information available, yeah, we can
Hmm.
let the buyer know, and it's up to the buyer to verify any questions they might have. We can
Okay.
help get the contacts together.
Sure.
We might advise them on different things they might want to know. And then
Yeah.
it would be up to the buyer. And if they need help with that, we'll help. But we can't, let's see, I'm going to say this. I wouldn't say what that vendor is going to say because the vendor has to tell them.
Yes. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Understood.
One of the things that we do, let's say for your inspections, typically the buyer needs to be at least one person that represents the buyer. If it's more than one person, needs to be there. But we'll make sure that we're there with the inspector. And if there's things that maybe the inspector, for whatever reason, just didn't look at, we might mention that. So one
Okay.
example I could use, let's see, I'm going to say because this is a learning thing. So one example is maybe there's not a washer and dryer already in the property that's going to be for sale. So you could ask the inspector, well, you know, how do we make sure the door is going to completely close for this property once a washer and dryer is put in? They might have some advice on that.
Yes.
Or if there's,
Okay.
then again, they'll already give you information about at least the conditions of, the plumbing, the electrical. They can't tell you exactly what has to be prepared, but again, you get the report, the buyer gets the reports, they can look at all that and they can ask questions. If there's things that we may know about just from general knowledge, we can, you know, provide that information to the buyer, but
Mm.
the buyer has to make the decision what they need to um, specifically know about. And again, we use the disclosure sheets also so that the
Yeah.
buyers know this is what the seller has told us about this property.
Gotcha.
And that again leads to questions that the buyer can use and gain more information. And if
Right.
we need to help them gather information, we can help gather the information.
Good
Mhm.
transparency, right? That's excellent.
Yeah, that's the one of the keys.
Yeah.
If we're open and honest with each other, that helps the transaction go a lot more smoothly.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
You know what? What would you be able to help somebody that if the house did need repairs, right? Let's say they
Mhm.
went for an FHA mortgage, right? Right.
Mhm.
And you know how FHA is. Sometimes they say,
Mhm.
well, you got to paint this, or you got to do this, or you got, I don't know, whatever.
Mhm.
And can you point them to a contractor, or do you have somebody in the wings that can help with those repairs?
Yeah, we can send them to vendors. We may have our own vendors. And what we would do, let's say in the situation you described, we'd have
Yeah.
them go back to their lender to verify exactly what would need to be done and possibly the insurance company.
Yeah.
And a lot of that would come, at least in my experience, has been that comes out of the inspection itself. And then so if there's something else that needs to be done in order to, make sure the house can qualify, then we send them back through the lender and the insurance companies just to make sure that we don't recommend that you do something that's not going to help the situation at all.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. Mhm.
Excellent. So it
Yeah.
sounds like
Yeah.
it's a good educational, how do you say, like, as you go through the process of purchasing, you're going to point them to every resource that they may need, to
Yeah,
navigate it successfully. That's all,
yeah, the things that fit their situation.
Yeah.
When we were just talking about repairs, I'll say my experience has been it's usually the roof for Florida is what ends up being something that needs to be repaired in order to complete the transaction.
Okay.
So that's why
Okay.
those inspections are so important, and that the
Yeah.
buyer should always, I would say, the buyer should always get an inspection.
A home inspection, is that what you mean?
Yeah, they should always get the home inspection. And if there's,
Okay.
let's say, an additional inspection that makes sense,
Okay.
let's say they do the home inspection, but maybe termite damage is noticed, then again, the recommendation of the buyer would be, well, let's have a termite company come in and look at that because they're more specialized.
Yes.
And and to make sure that even though the home inspector saw it, the termite inspector, because that's what they're trained in, can tell you or give you a better idea what the extent of that is and what that means, what the implications might be.
Right.
And now the buyer has that additional information.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, with regard to commissions, like, do they have to pay
Mhm.
for this kind of stuff up front, or when are
Yeah,
commissions?
yeah.
What is a commission? First of all,
Yeah,
what is a commission and
so
how
the
does it work?
those like commission slash compensation.
Yeah.
That's what the buyers and sellers will pay to the agents for the work that they do, or the brokerage for the work that they do.
Okay.
It's all negotiable. There's no set commission rate or anything like that.
Okay.
So, and it's always, well, it's between the buyers and their brokerage, the sellers and their brokerage. And so typically, yeah, that's part of the cooperation. So there's no requirement that it has to be a certain amount. There's no requirement it has to be a certain percentage. I'll say typically it can be a flat fee, and then you can always list what's included in the fee. There could be multiple flat fees, and what's included in each of those fees are levels of service depending on, the brokerage itself. It
Okay.
could be based on a percentage of the sale price. It could be a combination of both of those things, and that probably keeps it simpler.
Right.
But there's other things that could be done. One key is that they need to be written. So you have to make sure it's written, all the parties understand it, and understand who pays, when it's paid, how all
Right.
that's determined. So then that
Yes.
way there's no surprises later on, and typically we do that up front. Like for
Okay.
instance, when I work with sellers, or sorry, with buyers, I get all that signed up front so that we know how we're going to do this as we go forward and how it's going to be paid and what the expectations are for both parties.
Right. Right.
And that way just clears up the questions early.
Yeah. Now, are you obligated to ethically discuss commissions with the buyers or sellers? And, do you have to go over that and disclose that kind of information, or do you just generally
Yeah.
talk about it, or how does that
Yeah,
work?
we would talk about it and then get a signature that I'll just say it this way, those are the rates that we're going to abide by.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah,
they would
like
clearly understand that.
right.
Number one, there's nothing set in stone. It's all negotiable, like you said.
Right.
But once they come to terms, then they understand that if they're going to
That's
pay 3%, let's say,
right.
they're gonna get X, Y, and Z for 3%.
Yeah, that's one way to do it, or it's just going to be 3%, let's say in our example,
Yeah,
of the sale price for the seller side and of the purchase price for the buyer side. And it could be the same, it could be different, let's say for the buyer and seller.
yeah.
Again, typically there's one brokerage representing one or the other. And there may be some cases where the brokerage represents both, because the broker could have the listing first and they have an agreement with the seller. And so those commissions slash compensation would be listed there. And then that
Hmm.
same broker finds a buyer for that property and they'll have another agreement with the buyer. And so then that's on the commission payments. But then we were talking earlier. So if a buyer has the brokerage agreement with the realtor, then we have the most of the agreements have it, but it's up to each brokerage that says if it happens that a buyer is interested in or wants to put a contract on a property that the brokerage has listed, and especially if that specific realtor has it listed, then it turns into a transaction broker agreement. It's an automatic. So the way both
Okay,
parties get represented equally.
okay, okay. So there
Yeah.
is a different kind of um, how would you say, like transaction broker, you said,
Yeah.
versus what other kind? What is it
Well,
called?
if
Like,
you
what is
the
it called when
buyers,
it's just the
yeah,
buyer for if you work just for the buyer?
right. And then you could just work for the seller as well, and that'd be part of your listing agreement and the
Gotcha.
agency you're going to have with the buyer or with the seller. Sorry.
If you're working for the buyer, just for the
Mhm.
buyer, does the buyer pay
Mhm.
the commission?
They can. It again, that's what your buyer's brokerage agreement would indicate. Who's going to pay it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, speaking of agreements, that's a good
Hmm.
segue. You got a buyer's agreement there that you're talking about and a listing. Can you break down those and what that sort of entails? I mean, you don't have to go too deep, but whatever you think is relevant for our audience to know about.
On the buyer side, so for the buyer broker agreements, it's
Yeah.
basically the type of property,
Yeah.
the locations for the property, and again, let's use general terms. Let's say we talk about
Sorry
the
about
three
that.
counties. So let's say it's that buyer wants a single family home in one of these three counties. There'll be a time frame for when the agreement starts and when it ends. There's an not an extension, but there's an indication. Let's say we've shown somebody a property, but they decide to buy it outside of the transaction agreements. There's a limit of how long that would be. So let's say I show properties from, let's just make it easy, from May 1st to May 30th.
Uh-huh.
I did show the buyer three properties they're interested in. And then, but there's an extension that if they go to contract in that property in June, so before the end of June, that I would still be owed a commission. And if they happen to go to contract in one of those properties, then I would still get a commission based on that agreement. So again, that's part of it. It
Gotcha.
includes the transition to be a transaction broker. Again, we're going to, if the buyer's going to buy a property that the brokerage or the agent has listed, that's part of it. That's automatic between the parties.
Okay.
Um, and then again, what those percentages are, what the fees are going to be, because you could
Yes.
have different fees as well as the commission compensation piece as well. And again, they have
Yeah,
to be written, they have to be signed, they need to be part of your transaction.
sure. Let
Yeah,
me
and then
ask you a question. So,
yeah.
a listing agreement, like you're calling it, right? A listing agreement,
Mhm.
it's usually for a set period of time, right? If you're trying to sell the
Yeah,
house, right?
yeah, that's on the seller side. And again, yeah, you'll have a time frame that you intend to have the property listed. It can be renewed. It can be canceled. Again, there's all the conditions are in the agreement itself.
Yes.
Um,
What
it
if the
I,
seller found a buyer on his own? Is he
your
obligated to still pay a commission?
your listing agreement would indicate how that situation would be handled.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So again, I can say it depends. So it
Yeah,
depends on what's in your
sure.
listing agreement for
What
that.
y'all agreed to. Sure, sure.
Right.
Yeah, because it always isn't just like, oh, well, I found them, you don't deserve nothing. Well, no,
Right.
now who's going to do all the work to make sure that the buyer, gets
Right.
everything that they need, especially if it's a transaction. What'd you call it again? A transaction?
Yeah, you change to be it if the agent brings the buyer and the property is listed by the agent or by the
Yeah,
brokerage,
yeah.
then you can have consent to be a transaction broker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and
Yeah, but
so
if,
just because the
Mhm.
buyer or the seller finds somebody, probably their best move would be just to say, hey, Amir, uh, this guy is showing interest in my house, but I don't want to deal with all of his financing. I have no idea. And he pawns them
Right,
off to you to take care of, right?
right,
Well, that
yeah,
would
let's
probably be the best approach.
yeah, and as long as that buyer is not represented by someone else. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And again, those are just questions that we have to ask and clarify.
Right.
So let's say in that situation, somebody did come to that seller,
Yeah.
and let's say the myself as a listing agent, I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that the buyer was coming, or I didn't know the buyer was found.
Right.
But then when I do find out, I'd have to ask, do you have another agency that's representing you or another brokerage? And if they do, then that brokerage has to represent them. And I still
Gotcha.
just represent the seller. But if they don't have anyone,
Excellent.
then it becomes a question. Would you like me to represent you? I can talk about the transaction broker. I'd still get them to sign an agreement so that we know,
Hmm.
and then we can move forward from there.
Understood.
Mhm.
Cool. Very good.
Yeah.
So if somebody decides that they want to start house hunting, right?
Hmm.
I'm sure there's many ways to do that, and a lot of people just go on the internet and start floating
Right.
around and
Hmm.
but what would you say would be the best approach if they really just didn't want to do a lot of research? And I mean, couldn't they just call you and ask you, or how does that work?
Yeah, they could if somebody just doesn't want to be bothered with going through the internet search. But again, that's the most common method that people find a property that they're interested in. They'll do
Yeah,
their internet searches on the different internet sites like a
yeah,
Zillow, like a Homes.com, like a Redfin. So all those different sites are available.
yeah,
But somebody could let's say they find one of those properties that, oh, I like this one property. They could call me directly or call any other realtor directly and ask if we could help them find a certain one. And here's one that I seem to like. And then what I do is have a consultation with that particular person,
right,
get a get an understanding of what it really is they want, what it really
right,
is they need, make those two things match, and I can
right.
do the searches for them, have properties that fit those criteria sent over to them, and I try to do it weekly. Again, it all depends on what that customer might want.
Yeah,
And then so they can look through those specific properties that I find that match that.
yeah,
And what's neat is that it updates automatically in the different statuses of the different properties. So again, if they're interested in something, then they get a chance to see it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
think a mirror that what I like about this is like you're a human being who knows more than just the facts that are presented on the internet. I mean, just because somebody
yeah.
sees a school district, unless they want to do a deep dive on the internet and maybe look around on, what are the ratings of that school and all that. I mean, you're already going to know all that. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, so to me, there's the human side of this transaction where the internet just presents facts, but you know all the nitty gritty and behind the scenes. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah. There's a benefit to, you can find, I'm going to say it this way, pretty much everything you want to know about a property on the internet. Let's
Y-
leave it general like that.
Yeah,
However, if you need something specific or if you want to get a real idea of, excuse me, what's going, where that property is, what's going on, so your local realtor can go take a look at it.
yeah,
Drive over there, ride over there. Of course, people use drones and all those kinds of things, but there's something to be said for going to a property for somebody,
yes,
taking a look at it, and really, letting them, well, I went by and I saw it in person. This is what I noticed. This is what I didn't notice. And, answer the questions that way.
sure.
I have
Yeah,
done that for buyers that just don't have the time to go see that. And
right,
for one of the buyers, when I went to go look at the property, I said, never mind. Based on knowing and understanding their situation, there was way too much work that would have to be done for them to be able to afford it.
sure.
And so I said, but then when I had another one, I said, let me go take a look first to make, because
Yes,
it was just to make sure. And that ended up being a property that would have been suitable for them. And it would, we'd go forward, take some more looks at it, we'll do some more
yes,
detail.
yes,
So that way, and especially if people are out of town and they don't live local to the area,
yeah,
there's a lot of good information on the internet. But
right.
having somebody go look at that for you makes a huge difference because there's that personal interpretation that actually eyes on it that tells you, okay, this is what it really is.
Would you say that when you're looking for a property, right, and you found something that perked your interest, you were
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, this looks really nice. It looks like it might meet my needs. When they tell you about the taxes,
Yeah.
right,
Hmm.
Amir, aren't they telling you what the current year is for those taxes,
Yeah, that's
right?
that's
And
right.
if you ended up buying it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, shouldn't you know what the purchase price was when the original buyer bought it? Or the current buyer bought it, because you as the new buyer, you're going to end up paying more. Don't the taxes go up based on your
Yeah.
purchase price, or what? Or how
Yeah,
does that work?
yeah. In general, that your taxes would go up. So the taxes that you see when you go look at public records, that's the current tax for the current property for the current owner.
Yes.
And what we don't have any control over is what the changes are, but you definitely have a new purchase price, which is typically higher than what it was bought for. And so
Yep.
the taxes get based on, I'll say it this way, a percentage of that new purchase price.
Yes.
So, what I tell people is that your taxes will be different. Most likely they'll be higher. How
Yes.
much, the tax authority would have to tell you or give you a better indication.
Yes. Yes.
And that's
And
what I
there's
recommend for
a
people.
home, what is it called? Homestead type thing where you can qualify for,
Yeah, if you,
and at least that'll help you a little, right?
Yeah, if you're going to use the home as your primary residence, you
Yeah.
can file for the homestead exemption, and that gives you, I'll say, a discount of $25,000 off the taxable amount of the home.
Yes. Okay. That's
Yeah.
good. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes too, right? Because I'm a veteran and I qualified for a veteran discount too
Mhm.
through Pasco County. Isn't there other things like that too, or seniors
There,
maybe?
there are some other things. The ones that I'm going to go back to my memory on this one based on the last homestead exemption form that I saw.
Yeah.
If you're a widow or widower, there's a discount. I think if you have some type of disability, I don't know what all the ones are specifically.
Yes.
There's another type of discount. There's the actual homestead exemption.
Hmm.
There may be others, but those are the three that stand out in my mind.
It's definitely
Mhm.
worth looking into, wouldn't you
Yeah.
agree? Because you could maybe, you could be paying more than you realize when you could possibly
Right.
qualify for something. And that's if you even
Mhm.
decide not to sell. If you're sitting in your house and you're listening to this amazing conversation, I'll just
Mhm.
call it that, Amir. Amir, it's an
All
amazing
right.
conversation. But I mean, I'm just saying that, you might have just learned something, folks.
Mhm.
At least I hope you did. Go and get there's a lot more than meets the eye. There's not just the home and homestead exemption. There's other ways to save money on your taxes. I would encourage you to call
Yeah. Mhm.
the Pasco County tax collector.
Mhm. Yep, and that's where you get the best information by calling the tax authority. You can let them know, kind
Yep,
of how your transaction's going. And
yep,
trying to think, the lenders will also check the taxes because they want to be able to figure out, well, how much do we need to determine if you need to escrow, if you decide to escrow, how
yeah,
much do we need to put in the escrow for taxes?
yes, yes,
Yeah,
and
so the
then
lender definitely wants to know that.
yes, yes, because it could increase, right? And they could be asking for
Yeah.
more if the taxes go up. Yeah,
Yeah, and that is something for people to keep in mind that after, let's say, you secure the mortgage, you live there for a year. Well,
yeah,
based on your insurance cost or your tax cost, your escrow amount could go up, which means your total payment goes up again. So
yes,
that's typically what affects your payment amount.
uh-huh, yeah,
And then again, in those cases where it goes down, you would hope that that would help your escrow on your payment as well, that
yes,
your escrow would go down.
yes,
Yeah, and I have seen that where somebody's insurance in this particular case was lowered, and so they're expecting their escrow is going to decrease.
yes,
But I recommended to them, I said, call your insurance company, find out why the change was there,
yes, yes,
because
definitely.
there's many different things that could cause your insurance cost to change, and
Yes.
especially if it goes down. My first thought is, did they drop a certain type of coverage that I might want?
Yes,
But
right.
you have to call them back and find out what it really was.
Sure. Sure. Moving into our last topic here before
Mhm.
you give your some final advice for our
Mhm.
audience. HOAs. I know you wanted to talk about HOAs in the state of Florida.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion around HOAs, and so this is kind of my advice on the HOAs. They're not good or bad. It just depends on your situation. And I would like to bring a distinction. There's HOAs, there's condo associations, and there's cooperatives. And each of those have a different statute that the Florida legislature has in place. So we're only going to talk about the HOAs and that statute. It's Florida Statute 720, and that covers HOAs. So it won't cover condo associations and it won't cover cooperatives. There's similar ways that those three organizations operate, but again, the laws are specific for each one. So and something to be aware of, you could be moving into a property that's called a condominium, but it may actually be an HOA or it may actually be a cooperative. And as part of that whole contract process, we make sure we understand what that determination is and get you the proper documents that community needs to provide typically.
Hmm.
So you understand that as a buyer, you're supposed to read all this stuff that describes what type of association you're becoming a part of with buying this particular property.
Yes.
There's a link to the HOA statute itself, um, and and that tells you everything that as an owner you would need to know, or maybe as a citizen, I say, you would need to know about the
Mm.
law. It describes it all. Of course, you always need to refer to an attorney to get detailed information, but it gives you a good idea about what an HOA can and can't do. But then you also have to understand and review and look at and read, and however many ways I can say that, your specific HOA documents. And you would also want to be aware of, is your HOA set of documents, is it only for your community, or is there another, let's call it a master association, that governs what we'll call your sub-association? So you've got state statutes, you've always got county laws and locality laws and regulations, all those. And then you might have a master association, let's say if it's a large development, and let's just say let's just use a number to say it has 5,000 homes in it. They probably have a master association. And then underneath that, based on how they divided up all the different subdivisions in that big grand subdivision,
Hmm.
each of those individual subdivisions may have additional um, covenants, restrictions, all those kinds of things, declarations, bylaws, all that. And usually the way it works is that if there's something in the master association, it would apply to the sub-associations, and the sub-associations must follow all those, but they could be more restrictive in the sub-association.
Mm.
So,
Okay.
but again, they can't, violate's not the right word. They can't go against what the statutes say. So your local laws and the state statutes. So if there's
Yeah.
something in your association documents that's in conflict with the statute, then I believe, again, I'm not a lawyer, so the lawyer would have to tell you, but I believe the state statute would would be what determines what can happen next.
Okay.
I
So
guess one
state
example,
trumps the local.
yeah, one I could say one thing I do know about. Like there in the statute, there's if somebody doesn't want a lawn, but they're in the HOA, but they want to do the Florida friendly landscaping or xeriscaping, if your association documents say, well, you must have a front lawn of Bermuda grass, let's use it that way. Since the state statute says no, you don't have to. You can have a xeriscaping, you can have low water use, whatever the actual terms are, you can do that. And so the sub your association documents won't govern, the state would.
Gotcha.
Because it's part of conserving water, and we're in the drought now. So
And I think too,
it's,
one of the things that stood out to me about HOAs, two things. The first one was when you buy a house and it has an HOA,
mm-hmm.
they actually charge you a fee, an initial fee. It has nothing to do with your dues, but it has everything to do with just like a fee that you have to pay to be part of the association. It's a one-time fee, but still you
Yeah,
got to pay it.
yeah, and it
And
depends.
I
Yeah.
was disappointed, I'll tell you,
Mm-hmm.
Amir, when I found that out.
Yeah,
Oh,
and again, that depends on the association itself and how
yes,
it's governed, and that may be one of their requirements that
yes,
all, let's say, new residents have to pay this fee.
yes.
Um, there's some that don't. You either pay the balance, you might have to pay the whole next year's association dues. It depends on the
It all
association.
depends. Yeah,
Yeah, you may
yeah,
have an approval process you have to go through.
yeah,
So yeah, that's
yeah.
just part of whatever is in their declaration documents, their bylaws, their restrictive
Sure,
covenants. And
sure.
that's why it's important that as a buyer you read those things, and even as a seller that you understand what's in those documents.
Yeah,
And I believe they have to be provided electronically, meaning for all the owners that are currently there. I might be wrong on that, but again, the statute indicates how they're supposed to be provided.
sure.
And part of the
Yeah, we did
contract
ours at
process,
closing. When we closed on our house, we got them hand delivered, and all that.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, one of the things that, at least in the contracts I've used, I can say it that way.
Yeah,
There's always a place that asks, is there an association, some type of association? If there is, yes, then you
yeah,
have to actually get those documents that the buyer
okay.
sees them. And typically there's a
Yeah.
number of days you need to provide those. So that's another place where your realtor helps you. Well, let's get a copy of those documents so you have them as soon as possible.
If
So
somebody's
you as a
interested
buyer.
in buying into a community, right, Amir,
Mhm.
they probably should take a look at their HOA requirements
Yes.
before, because they may get in
Mhm.
there and all of a sudden, they may want to do certain things, and the HOA says, no, you can't do them. And that might be a restriction or a constraint that
Right. Mhm.
a new homeowner may not like. Like, don't tell me that I can't do this, this, or this.
Yeah.
I'm paying for this taxes and I'm doing, you know what I mean? Some people get really disgruntled about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and that's exactly right.
Yeah,
As a buyer, you need to look at those association documents. Even as an owner, you also need to
yeah,
go back and periodically look at those
right.
so you understand what's being done, why it's being done, what the current rules, regulations, procedures are, so that
Yes,
you're informed about questions that you might have
yeah,
or things that
yeah.
you might see. And
Do
that
do your due diligence, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and it's all there. It's you get
yeah,
the way I understand it, all those things are supposed to be provided to owners or available for owners to look at and
yes,
review. And if they have questions, my advice would be call your association, either the board itself, if they have a board contact, or the association management company, and
okay,
submit your questions, get your questions answered so that you have the information you need.
right. Now I'm going to go to before I give you the final word here, Amir.
Mhm.
I'm going to share my screen,
Okay.
and I'm just going to do the content. You and I will be sort of tucked in the background here. Um, but I'm sharing my screen, folks, and the reason I
Yep.
wanted to
Hmm.
drive you to my website here, and Amir is going to give you, well, I'm going to show you Amir's website. That's what I'm going to do. So, but on my website, the reason I partner with this man is because, well, other than being a good friend, but I mean, he's an ethical kind of guy, and I appreciate the customer-minded that he has. His approach is like mine, and I like that. So I put them on my website, and when together we're partnering to help each other in our businesses. And right here, Pasco County Business Directory, this little link right here on the website. If you just click on that, right, it'll start listing all of the prime partners that I'm associated with, right? And as you can see, we just go down a little bit here,
Hmm.
right? And here is one of the folks, Leaders Insurance. All right. Amir and I were talking about that. You can get a homeowner's quote from this nice lady. Her name is Angel, and she's awesome. And she is a broker, so she can shop
Hmm.
around. But then as you go down, right, I've got two good buddies of mine, and one of them is Amir here, right? And he's a realtor, and his link is right under Prime Partner Realtors. And obviously, if you just click on that, right, it's going to pop up. And Amir, do you see your website or do you still see mine?
Yep. No, I see it. I see
Do
my
you?
website
Oh,
there. Yep.
okay. I just want to make sure it's still
Mhm.
sharing the same thing. You know how
Yep.
these Zoom meetings go. But this is Amir's website. Obviously, his name right here, right? And you can go to this website. The URL is ajkrealestate.com. ajkrealestate.com.
Yeah.
Okay,
Trying
you
to
can
keep
go
it
there.
simple.
Yep, I know that is simple. That is good, right? And so Amir, on this website, right, this get started button. Can you walk us through just real quick, if they wanted to reach out to you, or if they want, what does this get started button
Sure.
do?
Yeah. If you click the Get Started button, it'll take you to a form. And when you fill out that form, it'll ask for your contact information. It'll ask you a few questions. And then once you submit that, I'll get an email that indicates your interest. And then I can get back to you either through email, through your phone, depending on how you'd like to be contacted.
Excellent,
We'll get started and get you the information that you need.
excellent. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. That's perfect. All right, so that's how you can either use my website or go right to him, right? ajkrealestate.com.
Yep.
and that's how you can get to his site if you want to reach him. Folks, I know he's my friend, and you're going to think I'm like, Keith, you're just being biased. Well, you know what? I've known Amir for a while now, right? We go to the same Bible
Yeah.
study,
Yeah.
and we appreciate each other's ethical approach and customer-minded, focused approach. That's what we like. Keep the customer first, you know.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so we just want to stress that. Please feel free to either use my site or directly go to Amir's site. And
Right.
so let's see. Amir, what would you want to give as your final words of advice and wisdom for anybody that might be either selling or considering buying?
So, from a real estate perspective, I would want everybody to know that this is a big cooperation effort. So it's a cooperation between, the buyers, the sellers, the realtors that are involved, and all the other, I'm going to say it this way, professional organizations that are involved. So your inspectors, your lenders, your insurance companies, your government authorities, that need to be involved, and even down to the HOA when you need to contact an HOA for something. Um, and the different vendors that may need to be involved, for fixes or for advice. It's a big cooperation. No one party, can make or break the transaction. So, but the more that all those parties cooperate, the easier the transaction is, the simpler the transaction is. And it's good just to ask questions so that everybody knows what's the best way we can work together to resolve the problems. Because that's the main thing we want to do, make sure that the transaction goes as smoothly as possible for all the parties, primarily the buyer and seller, and do whatever we can to remove obstacles and get everybody to the closing table. As I
Excellent.
mentioned to you, one of the lenders I work with, Frank Gemma, he mentioned nobody gets paid until everything gets closed. So let's do all that we can to make sure everything can get closed.
Yes, yes, yes,
And when you start with that, it makes the whole process go easier.
yes.
It really does.
That's excellent. Yeah, no, that's
Mhm.
excellent. That's excellent. Yeah, I think people need to be very collaborative these days and very transparent and I think people can feel safe. I like using this word safe when they're around people they can trust. So
Yeah.
folks, I know that trust is something that's earned. I realize that.
Mhm.
But you know what? Some of you have done business with me. A lot of you have done business with Sandy and myself. I wouldn't be doing this broadcast right now with this gentleman if I didn't feel I could trust him. And
I
so,
appreciate that. And same for you, Keith. Yeah.
yes, yes, and people need to start, being there for each other, and that's what we're trying to do. And so, and I feel confident that I can refer this man to you. And so, if you have any real estate needs, you know what, please, give this man a call and have a conversation. Okay.
All right. Thank you,
Well, that
Keith. And
being
I'm
said,
happy
Amir,
to
anything
help.
else you want to share real quick?
Just again, thank you, Keith, for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. I work with a real estate coach, and so he told me, Amir, you need to do a video or two. So I'll be able to call him and say, well, with Keith's help, I was able to do a video.
That's
So
excellent.
he'll be
Yeah,
he'll be
no.
happy to hear it.
Yep. Well, we'll be doing
So I
more in the
appreciate
future, especially in a
it.
couple other topics that I'd like
Yeah.
to talk to
Hmm.
Amir about. So stay tuned, folks. But again, thank you for tuning in today. Appreciate your time, and we hope you have an awesome day. Lord bless you
All
all. All
right.
right.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks again,
Amir.